Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission here, as always, is to take really complex source material, the kind of stuff that usually takes months to unpack and distill it down, make it usable knowledge, and show you why these big ideas actually matter in your life.
And today, well, we've got a pretty ambitious project lined up.
Definitely ambitious. We're trying to build a new foundation, really, for understanding what it means to be human, and crucially, how that connects to psychological well-being.
We're doing that by weaving together two seemingly very different strands of thought. On one hand, you've got Martin Heidegger's continental philosophy, his whole existential analytic.
Deep stuff.
Deep stuff, exactly. And on the other, we're bringing in cutting-edge cognitive science, specifically the Enactivist approach, people like Francisco Varela.
So philosophy meets science, and the goal?
The goal is to use this synthesis to forge a framework, a really holistic one. We want to redefine what it means for you to be a person, a person who exists in a body engaged with the world.
Okay, before we dive into the synthesis itself, why do we even need this radical approach? What's the problem we're trying to solve?
The core problem. It's something that's really dogged Western thinking, and medicine too, for centuries. It's that persistent Cartesian dichotomy.
The mind-body split. We hear that phrase a lot.
We do. Sometimes it's called the Gnostic problem too, this idea of the mind feeling sort of trapped or separate from the body.
But what's the real-world cost of that split, especially when we're talking about mental health?
Oh, the cost is huge. Ever since Descartes, really famously, drew that line in the sand mind as this thinking, non-physical thing, res cogitans. Body is unthinking, physical stuff, res extensa. Well, it created a massive headache.
How does the non-physical mind talk to the physical body? That puzzle.
Exactly, and that split thinking carries right through into how we often approach mental illness today.
Right, so we either see it as purely biological, like a chemical imbalance in the brain, sort of detached from your actual experience, or we treat it as purely mental, like thoughts and beliefs floating around somewhere separate from the physical person.
Precisely. And clinically, that forces this isolation. You miss the patient as a whole, lived person. If you start by defining mind and body as separate, then how do you explain conditions where they're obviously tangled up, think chronic pain or anxiety or depression?
It becomes psychosomatic, that kind of vague catch-all term.
Right. We're always looking for the bridge between two things we decided were fundamentally separate from the get-go. It's a setup for failure, really.
So our mission today is to just dissolve that separation.
Completely. We're going to explore how blending Heidegger's concept of Dasein, which literally means being there or being in the world, with Varela's embodied cognition, gives us this holistic, ecological, existentially grounded view.
A perspective where who you are is fundamentally about attunement.
Attunement, yes. It's about this continuous, ideally seamless flow and integration between you, your body, and the world you live in. Health is the fluidity of that whole system.
Okay, let's start chipping away at that Cartesian split then, using Heidegger's toolkit. The big concept is Dasein. What does calling the human being Dasein actually achieve right off the bat?
It's a really profound move. Dasein is Heidegger's word for the human way of being. And the key thing is he refuses to define us by some fixed property like rational animal or Descartes' thinking thing.
So it's not what we are, but that we are.
In a way, yes. Our essence is existence. Dasein is the entity for whom its own being is always an issue, something it's concerned about.
And that immediately dissolves the objectivide you mentioned, because the subject is defined by its being in a world.
Exactly. Dasein is fundamentally being in the world in der Weltsein. That's a single structure. Subject and world aren't separate things that meet. They arise together, they co-disclose each other.
So no isolated mind peering out at an external world.
No. Heidegger insists we're not like scientists looking through a microscope at reality. We are a unified structure, cognitive, existential, that exists through our engagement, our participation in the world. The world is the very condition of our possibility.
Okay, so if the self isn't this isolated mind, but is experienced in action, in engagement, what does that mean for the body, the physical self?
It forces a crucial distinction. We have to separate the idea of the body as a mechanism.
Yeah.
The anatomical biochemical machine that a doctor studies.
The present-at-hand body, to use his term.
Precisely, the present-at-hand object. We need to distinguish that from the lived body. The lived body is the body as we experience it pre-reflectively, as the medium through which we engage with the world.
Like when I reach for my coffee cup. My focus is the cup, the coffee, not my elbow angle or nerve impulses. My body's just doing it. It's transparent.
That transparency is the lived body in its normal mode. It's seamlessly integrated into the action. Now, when illness strikes, physical or mental, that transparency shatters.
The body suddenly forces itself into awareness.
Yes, it becomes conspicuous, problematic. And this signals a breakdown not just in, say, physiology, but in the whole integrated dynamic of self, body, and world. The body becomes stubbornly present at hand, mirroring the disruption in our ability to cope and engage.
Which is why conditions like anxiety or chronic pain feel so all-consuming. They disrupt that fundamental integration.
Exactly. They defy that neat psychosomatic split because they are simultaneously bodily and mental afflictions. They're symptoms of the whole structure being out of whack.
To really grasp this idea of engagement, we need Heidegger's famous distinction: ready to hand versus present at hand.
This is absolutely key to understanding Dasein's everyday existence. Our primary way of being, our default mode, is ready to hand zu Handenheit.
This is the seamless flow state.
It's seamless, practical coping, unreflective action. Think about any skill you've mastered: typing, riding a bike, playing music. The tools you use, even the environment, they just fade into the background.
They become extensions of you, part of the doing.
Right, they're integrated. You're not thinking about the hammer, you're thinking about hammering the nail. The focus is the task, the project. That's praxis, pure, unself-conscious action.
The musician isn't analyzing finger placement, they're just making music.
Absolutely. But then, engagement fails.
Mm-hmm.
The hammerhead flies off, the guitar string snaps, the computer freezes,
The flow is broken, ruptured.
and instantly, that tool shifts. It becomes present at hand for Handenheit.
Wow.
It's no longer part of the seamless action. It's suddenly this detached object sitting there, inert, with properties that demand our attention, our analysis.
The musician stops playing and stares at the broken string, thinking about how to fix it.
Precisely. And that rupture, that shift from ready to hand to present at hand, is the crucial insight for understanding illness.
So illness isn't just about a physical limitation, like I can't lift this. It's the breakdown in smooth coping, the loss of the ability to use things for something meaningful.
Yes. Illness, physical or psychological, often throws us into a state where the world, our bodies, even our own thoughts, feel overwhelmingly present at hand. Simple tasks become laborious, requiring conscious effort.
It's a loss of freedom then, the freedom to just be and do without constantly analyzing.
A massive loss of freedom, the freedom to pursue the projects that define us. Phenomenologically speaking, health is that background state of unbroken attunement, that feeling of being seamlessly at home in your world where things are ready to hand.
Okay, so we're engaged, we have projects, but what's the driving force? Why does Dasein engage at all? What's the engine behind this?
Heidegger calls the ontological foundation care, or Sorge. Now, this isn't just an emotion like worrying or being kind, though it underpins those feelings.
That's deeper than that.
Much deeper. It's an ontological category. It's part of the fundamental structure of Dasein itself. It signifies that the world always shows up for us as meaningful, as something we're concerned with, structured by our possibilities and our future.
It sounds like it inherently involves time, looking ahead.
It absolutely does. Care, for Heidegger, unifies Dasein's temporality. There's being ahead of itself, projecting into future possibilities. There's being already in a world, our thrownness, being born into a specific situation we didn't choose. And there's being alongside our everyday dealings with things and people right now.
So human existence is always leaning forward, oriented towards what's possible.
Intrinsically future-directed. We're always operating out of the possibilities we're trying to realize, the projects we care about.
And if that capacity for care collapses, if we lose that sense of direction, of future possibility,
then the very ground of our being starts to tremble. That's where profound psychological distress can manifest. Care underlies everything we do, whether it's practical action or theoretical contemplation.
even the detached scientist studying something.
Even that detachment is driven by a form of care, a concern for knowledge, for truth. It's this existential pull towards purpose, towards the future, that makes our way of being different from, say, a rock or even a non-conscious organism.
Okay, this idea of self and world being tangled up, co-created through active engagement, the body being this transparent medium, it feels like a natural bridge to the science side. Let's connect Heidegger's existential view to embodied cognition.
It is a surprisingly smooth transition, actually. The active tradition, folks like Varela, Evan Thompson, Alvin Noe, provides a modern, scientifically grounded language for describing exactly the kind of circular dynamics Heidegger was getting at existentially.
People often talk about the 4E model with this approach. What are those E's?
Right, the 4 E's. Cognition is seen as Embodied, it fundamentally depends on the kind of body we have. Embedded, it happens within a specific environment and uses that environment's structure. Enacted, it arises from the dynamic interaction, the sense-making between the organism and its world. And extended cognitive processes aren't always just in the head. They can extend out into the world, incorporating tools and technology.
That extended part immediately clicks with Heidegger's ready to hand. The tool becomes part of your thinking.
It's a perfect modern parallel. If you use your smartphone to navigate and you're just following the directions smoothly, that phone isn't just an external object. It's become a seamless, ready-to-hand extension of your cognitive process of getting there.
Until the battery dies.
Exactly. Then boom, it shifts to present at hand. It's just this inert brick and your coping breaks down. You have to stop and figure out what to do about the phone rather than just using it.
And the core concept, tying this all together for the Enactivist, is autopoiesis. Sounds complex.
Autopoiesis. It's a term Varela got from his mentor, the biologist Humberto Maturana. It literally means self-production. The idea is that living systems aren't like computers processing input-output. They're networks that are constantly producing and maintaining themselves.
They generate their own organization, their own boundaries.
Precisely. They're self-creating and self-maintaining. They aren't just passively shaped by the outside world. They actively define what counts as their world by maintaining their own structure.
So the organism acts, maintains itself, and in doing so, shapes the environment it perceives and interacts with. A loop.
A continuous circular causality. It mirrors Heidegger perfectly. Dasein, through its care and its projects, co-constitutes its world. Autopoiesis gives that existential insight a grounding in biological principles.
This relationship, self and world being inseparable, co-defining, is sometimes summed up with that phrase, not one, not two. What does that really capture?
It captures the rejection of the old categories. It's not dualism, mind and world aren't separate substances. They're deeply interconnected.
Okay.
But it's also not a simple monism where everything just reduces down to one thing, like saying mind is just brain activity or the organism is just a product of its environment.
It's more dynamic than that.
Much more. They're two inseparable aspects of one ongoing, evolving process. They co-determine each other in this continuous loop of action and sense-making. The organism defines itself, and in doing so, enacts its world.
It's not just passively receiving information.
No. It's actively creating its world of significance. Which brings us nicely to the idea of Umwelt.
Umwelt. That's from the biologist Jacob von Uexküll, right? The idea that each organism lives in its own subjective bubble, its own self-world.
Exactly. And it underlines that perception isn't passive reception. It's active sense-making. The world doesn't just arrive pre-packaged with objective labels. Your embodied structure, your history, your goals, your physical capacities actively selects and organizes what's relevant to you.
The classic example is the tree. A tree is physically just a tree.
Right. Chemically, physically, it has certain properties. But those properties only become meaningful based on your engagement, your project.
So for a carpenter, it's board feet, grain patterns.
For a kid playing hide and seek, it's about whether it provides good cover, its affordances for hiding. For an artist, it might be about shape, color, texture. For an ecologist, it's part of a larger system.
The perception is enacted based on the context of action.
Exactly. The objective tree gets individuated, made meaningful through Dasein's project.
We can even see this enacted perception at the level of basic sensory experience, like color, which philosophers argued about for ages.
Oh, definitely. The color debate is a fantastic case study for embodiment. Is red out there in the object a primary quality? Or is it purely in the head a secondary quality?
The old philosophical puzzle.
Varela and the Enactivist just sidestep that whole dichotomy. Color is neither. It doesn't exist independently in the object, waiting to be seen, nor is it just a subjective add-on by the mind.
So where does it come from?
It emerges from the interaction. It's brought forth, enacted, through the specific way our kind of organism, with our kind of visual system, engages with certain surfaces and light frequencies in our environment.
Our biological wiring shapes the experience.
Absolutely. Think about how our visual system is built, with opponent processes for color red versus green, blue versus yellow. Varela points out we literally can't experience a reddish green because the biological channels can't signal both simultaneously.
So the color red isn't a property of the apple, nor just a feeling in me, but something that arises between my visual system and the apple in the specific context of seeing.
Exactly. Our visual system enacts color as a dimension of our lived world. It's a product of the whole loop organism action environment.
Okay, so we have this picture of Dasein as this complex, embodied, world-enacting being, but complexity usually implies fragility, right?
It absolutely does. High complexity brings inherent vulnerability. And this leads us into the core existential structures of the self. Things like authenticity and its flip side, inauthenticity. We need to be careful with the term authenticity, though.
Right, it gets thrown around a lot, often in a kind of self-helpy way. What does Heidegger actually mean by Eigenlichkeit? Authenticity.
It's crucial to get this right. For Heidegger, authenticity is not a moral goal. It's not about being some kind of heroic, superior individual or achieving a permanent state of enlightenment.
It's not Nietzsche's Superman.
Definitely not. It's primarily a methodological tool. Its purpose is disclosure, uncovering the fundamental structures of Dasein that get hidden or distorted by everyday life, by tradition, by common sense.
So it's about seeing things clearly, seeing our own existence clearly.
Yes, retrieving what's already implicitly there but gets covered over. Authenticity is that moment, often triggered by anxiety or a confrontation with limits, where Dasein grasps its own finitude, its own possibilities, and realizes that its life is its own to take up, rather than just following the script.
That sounds demanding. Confronting your own finitude, taking responsibility, it makes sense why the default might be, well, the opposite.
Exactly. The easier path, the default state, is often inauthenticity, which Heidegger calls Dasein the they-self.
The they-self, like doing what they say you should do.
Precisely. It's the mode where Dasein just conforms, thinks what they think, does what they do, values what they value. It's comfortable, it requires minimal effort, it offers a sense of belonging.
And that lets you avoid those big, scary, existential questions.
Absolutely. It's seductive. In modern terms, you might see it in just passively consuming what algorithms feed you, or chasing trends, or performing that perfect curated identity online.
Just going along with the crowd.
Right. The problem, Heidegger says, is that in this mode, Dasein falls into verfalling, a kind of fallenness or decay. Not morally bad, he stresses, but a falling away from one's own authentic possibilities by getting completely absorbed in the public world.
How does this fallenness show up?
He points to a few key phenomena. There's chatter, Daskareta, superficial talk, passing along information without any real understanding or connection to the source, just repeating headlines.
Like gossip or just surface-level opinion.
Then there's curiosity, not genuine inquiry, but constantly seeking novelty just for distraction, flitting from one thing to the next without engaging deeply.
And ambiguity.
Ambiguity is where you kind of settle for the appearance of understanding. You skim the surface, maybe use the jargon, and convince yourself you've grasped something when you really haven't. It creates this illusion that everything's clear, everything's understood.
So the they self is busy performing understanding, performing belonging, but maybe missing the actual substance.
It's losing its unique ownness by being dictated by the day. It's still Dasein, but its possibilities are being realized through this generic public lens, preventing it from confronting its own fundamental situation, its freedom, its finitude.
So if Dasein is this comfortable, everyday slumber, what wakes Dasein? What forces that confrontation?
That jolt often comes from uncanniness, Unheimlichkeit, literally not at homeness.
Feeling out of place in your own life.
Exactly. When the familiar world, the reliable routines provided by Dasein, suddenly fracture maybe through a crisis, a loss, a sudden insight, the world feels strange.
Alien.
The usual ways of coping don't work anymore. Your own self feels fragile, maybe even unreal.
And this feeling, this not at homeness, is deeply connected to anxiety.
Yes. For Heidegger, anxiety isn't just fear of something specific. It's the fundamental attunement or mood that discloses Dasein's essential homelessness, its groundlessness. It's anxiety in the face of freedom, possibility, and the ultimate possibility or impossibility, which is death.
That phrase is powerful. Anxiety in the face of one's own most non-relational and unsurpassable possibility for being.
It strips away all the comforting illusions of the say self. It reveals your radical individuality and your finitude. The whole way you exist in the world feels suddenly questionable, uncanny.
This cycle, comfortable everydayness, then disruption and anxiety, then maybe finding a new stability, it sounds a bit like how we learn and grow throughout life. Is there a connection to developmental psychology?
There's a really interesting structural parallel, particularly with Piaget's ideas about cognitive development.
Piaget's equilibrium and disequilibrium.
Exactly. You can think of our everyday, unproblematic, mostly inauthentic existence as a state of equilibrium. Things are flowing smoothly. Identity feels stable because it's not being questioned. It's the ready-to-hand mode of being.
Then something happens. The broken hammer, the personal crisis, the uncanny realization.
That throws the system into disequilibrium. Your usual ways of acting and understanding don't match reality anymore. This forces reflection. Your identity, your way of being, which was transparent, suddenly becomes present at hand. Problematic.
And you have to do the work, what Piaget called accommodation and assimilation, to find a new balance.
Right. You have to adjust your internal structures, your understanding, to cope with the new reality, to reach a new, more robust state of equilibration.
So this fragility, this potential for breakdown and the need for restructuring, it's not a flaw, it's actually built into the system.
It seems to be intrinsic to Dasein's complexity. You have to risk destabilizing your current understanding, your current identity, to adapt and grow.
And mental disorders from this perspective could be seen as getting stuck in that breakdown state.
That's a key insight. Perhaps some forms of psychopathology represent a kind of persistent disequilibrium, where the individual gets stuck in that painful, effortful, present-at-hand mode, unable to regain the smooth, unreflective flow of ready-to-hand coping. The structure has collapsed and can't easily restabilize.
Okay, this gives us a powerful lens. Let's apply it more directly to understanding mental illness or disordered Dasein.
Right. So stepping away from just brain chemistry or just faulty thoughts, we frame psychopathology as this breakdown in the whole integrated system, self, body, and world, a fundamental loss of attunement.
And the body is absolutely central here.
Central. It stops being that transparent partner and becomes overwhelmingly present at hand. It might be experienced as alien, painful, uncontrollable, an object of constant anxious scrutiny.
You see that so clearly in anxiety disorders, suddenly being hyper-aware of your heartbeat, your breathing, things that should just happen.
Exactly. Those automatic, ready-to-hand bodily processes become detached objects of fear. The body feels unreliable, reflecting this broader collapse in Dasein ability to navigate the world meaningfully. And this view helps explain why somatic symptoms and mental states are so often intertwined in illness.
Like the physical slowness and depression isn't just a side effect.
It's part of the disordered structure itself. It reinforces the inertia, the inability to project into a meaningful future, the collapse of that temporal care structure we talked about.
Now, if authenticity involves this sometimes painful self-confrontation, is there a danger in striving too hard for it? Could being constantly self-aware become its own kind of problem?
That is a really important paradox, yes. Authenticity, remember, is often a fleeting moment of disclosure, a necessary rupture. Trying to live permanently in a state of intense self-awareness or constant introspection, that can be dangerous.
It leads to what some call hyperreflexivity.
Exactly. This state where you're constantly observing yourself, analyzing your own thoughts and feelings, treating your own self as an object. It can lead to profound self-alienation. It can actually contribute to problems like chronic depersonalization or even some psychotic states.
So the ability to lapse back into unreflective coping, into a kind of functional inauthenticity, is actually crucial for mental health.
It's essential for survival. We need that smooth, ready-to-hand flow for everyday functioning. Trying to make the self permanently present at hand fractures that flow. Health involves being able to move fluidly between reflection and transparency.
Authenticity is the necessary medicine sometimes, but not the daily diet.
Well put. The goal isn't to stay in that moment of rupture, but to integrate its insights and return to a more functional everydayness.
This brings up another interesting point about human vulnerability. Why do humans seem so prone to these kinds of deep existential or psychological disturbances compared to, say, animals in the wild? Just fulfilling basic needs isn't enough for us.
No, it highlights the maybe burden of human freedom and complexity. Thomas Fuchs makes this point: you don't really see chronic, persistent conditions like delusions or deep demoralization in animals living freely in their natural environment.
But you do see them in humans, and sometimes in animals in highly unnatural settings.
Like zoo animals, yes.
Right.
Or historically, you could argue, in groups like leisured aristocracies who lacked meaningful challenges. It suggests that for Dasein, simply having biological needs met is insufficient.
We need projects. We need that future directedness, that care.
We seem to require projects that demand genuine effort and engagement. If everything is provided, if there's no need to strive, no meaningful resistance from the world to overcome, Dasein can fall into boredom, apathy, a kind of existential malaise. What might look like idle engagement, pursuing trivial things just to fill time, becomes a way to avoid confronting this lack of genuine purpose.
So if permanent authenticity is risky, and just drifting in the they-self leads to decay, what is the therapeutic goal within this framework?
The aim isn't achieving some static state of perfect authenticity. It's more about restoring post-authentic everydayness,
Post-authentic everydayness, meaning
meaning restoring Dasein's fluidity, the ability to move appropriately between those moments of necessary self-confrontation, of reflection, authenticity, and the ability to engage in smooth, unreflective coping and action every day in authenticity.
it's about getting back to the ready-to-hand mode, but maybe in a wiser, more informed way, having gone through the disruption.
Exactly. It's not just returning to the same unquestioned routines. It's more like a hermeneutic spiral. You incorporate the understanding gained from the disruption, from the present-at-hand phase, into a new, more resilient way of being ready to hand.
Can you give an example?
Think about someone integrating a major physical change, like learning to use a prosthetic limb after an amputation. Initially, that prosthetic is intensely present at hand. It's foreign, awkward, requires constant conscious effort.
It feels alien.
Totally alien. But through persistent, effortful practice, through action, through praxis, the body schema gradually adapts. The prosthetic becomes integrated. It starts to feel like part of the self.
The uncanny becomes familiar, homely again.
Precisely. It eventually becomes ready to hand, allowing for smooth, unreflective movement again. Recovery, physical or psychological, is often about this process, re-embodying routines, restoring practical skills, making the world feel intelligible and navigable again, even if it's a new kind of normal. It's about restoring Dasein's ability to dwell comfortably, unselfconsciously in his world.
So if that's the goal, what does therapy actually look like? It can't just be analyzing thoughts or adjusting chemicals in isolation. You mentioned a dialogue of disclosure.
Right, it shifts the focus. It's less about directly correcting faulty beliefs in a Cartesian sense,
Yeah.
and more about facilitating a space where the patient can disclose and explore new possibilities for being, for engaging with the world.
The therapist is more like a partner in exploring the patient's world.
A co-in-the-world partner, yes. The focus is very much on the patient's attunement. Befindlichkeit is Heidegger's term, how the world is actually showing up for them, how it feels, what's ready to hand, what's become present at hand.
So it might involve more than just talking, maybe focusing on embodied experience.
Often, yes. The goal is ontological care, caring for the person's whole way of being. Restoring that ready-to-hand flow might involve encouraging concrete actions, sensor-motor tasks, engaging in rhythmic activities, or finding ways to re-engage socially.
Things that rebuild that sense of practical competence and connection.
Exactly. Things like movement therapies or narrative approaches that help someone reintegrate a traumatic experience, which initially felt alien and present at hand, back into their life story, making it part of a revised, understandable everydayness. It's about helping the patient open up new ways of practically being in the world.
Wow. Okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground here. From philosophy's critique of the mind-body split, through Heidegger's Dasein, Varela's Enactivism, and landing on a fundamentally different way to think about mental health and therapy.
It's a massive shift, really. The core takeaway has to be that mental life isn't just something happening inside your skull. It's fundamentally embodied, relational, enacted through your engagement with the world.
The self isn't found by looking inward, but made through doing outward.
Precisely. And psychological distress isn't just a symptom. It's a rupture in that whole fabric of being in the world, a loss of that vital attunement. This synthesis takes these big existential ideas, freedom, anxiety, finitude, and grounds them in the concrete reality of our lived, embodied, active experience.
And for you listening, the relevance here is deeply personal. It's about recognizing that this fragility, this potential for rupture, is part of the human condition. Maybe the first step towards resilience is seeing those forces of conformity, the Dasein, in your own life and accepting the inherent instability and potential of your own embodied existence. Health isn't about achieving some static perfection. It's about maintaining that dynamic flow.
And maybe to end, final thought to mull over, connecting back to biology and complexity. We mentioned autopoiesis, self-production. There's a related idea from complexity science, Eigen's paradox. Basically, the idea is that the more complex a system gets, the higher the chance of errors creeping in during its self-maintenance or replication.
So the very complexity that allows for our rich human experience, our language, our deep projects, our self-awareness, is the same complexity that makes us vulnerable to psychopathology. The potential for meaning comes with the risk of breakdown.
Exactly. Dasein's complexity is both its glory and its burden. If we need this complexity, this openness to experience, to adapt and grow, to navigate that hermeneutic spiral we talked about, then maybe we also need a certain amount of productive instability. and openness to being disturbed.
Too much stability leads to rigidity, stagnation.
Right, you can't adapt. You get stuck in old, broken patterns. But too much instability, too much plasticity threatens coherence. The whole system could collapse into chaos.
So the ongoing challenge for existential health is finding that balance.
How do we cultivate just the right amount of openness to disturbance enough to allow for learning, growth, adaptation, without tipping over into disorder? How do we stay dynamically stable? That's the tightrope walk of being human, perhaps. Engaging fully with the world, knowing that the hammer or our grasp on reality itself could always break.